Values what I had to say, but I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But a year and a half later, I was able to bring the capabilities of strategic thinking that I learned in the Navy, together with the knowledge and the content of Israeli-Palestinian relations. At that point, I was able to see, that was after Prime Minister Netanyahu was elected for the first time, believe it or not, in May 1986. As I was able to see that if Prime Minister Netanyahu would advance the negotiations with the Palestinians, everybody would support him. By the way, it's the same situation like today. But if he doesn't, the next government that will come in, they will have to deal with the Palestinian issue. But unfortunately, the people in government, civil servants, cannot professionally prepare for negotiations with the Palestinians because all of these issues are radioactive politically. So if you're in government, if you're a civil servant, you just cannot touch these issues. You can't actually think through the refugee issue or the resolution of the issue of Palestinian refugees when the government formally denies that there is a problem. Okay? So that's when I saw this discrepancy between the imminent challenge on the one hand and the inability of the government to prepare for it for the other hand. And I said to my bosses, we were all part of a non-profit, non-governmental organization. I said to my bosses, this is our opportunity. It's also our responsibility to prepare because the moment is coming. And in that moment, we will need the knowledge and we have to prepare. So we began to assemble all these experts from across the Israeli political and professional spectrum to prepare for the negotiations. I could not have known at the time that this exercise will make me basically one of a handful, literally a handful, 3, 4, 5 individuals in Israel that were capable of coordinating the negotiations. So when Prime Minister Barak was elected in 1999, and he decided, as I had anticipated, to embark in negotiations with the Palestinians, and they needed to build a team, there were really very few people that they could have brought on board to coordinate the team, and I was one of them. And I was lucky to be one of them. And that's how I found myself in the Prime Minister's office.
So who were some of the experts? I'm imagining historians, economists. What was? Yeah.
Basically, the Camp David. The Oslo Accord that was signed in September 1993. It's also called the Declaration of Principles. It was signed in Oslo and then re-signed again on the South Lawn of the White House on September 13. It actually names what we call the outstanding issues, meaning what are the issues that will be negotiated in the future. The issue of economics and security and borders and settlements and Jerusalem and refugees. It doesn't mention the word statehood, but it does refer to the political outcome of the Palestinian entity that will be created. So we just followed this list, and for every topic that was mentioned, we created a working group of experts. So among our experts, we had generals. Obviously, we had professors, we had economists, we had lawyers, we had people that specialized in taxation, but also in tax law, but also people that specialized in the international law. We had water experts because Israel and the Palestinians share water systems. And we had people who were experts in Jerusalem, who knew every street in Jerusalem.
Right.
And then, these expertise were just a starting point. We embarked on this huge learning curve. I remember at the time going on excursions in Jerusalem in places I really only knew existed from the map, right? All these Arab and Palestinian areas that very few Israeli Jews venture into. And here I was with my boss driving in his, Renault sedan. We're driving in these Palestinian areas where there's no Israelis and no Jews and no police and nobody to, just to see what it looks like.
Right.
So we understand the implications of drawing a border in one place or in another place. and so on. It was a fascinating period of of exponential learning. And in that respect, I was also very privileged because I was in my late 20s. I was 27, 28, 29. And because of my work, I got to sit in the room with the leading experts in Israel and some of the leading international experts that came in to support our work. So
Right.
it was really an exceptional, formative, personal, and professional experience.
So you pointed out that the way you put it, from Menachem Begin to Netanyahu, every prime minister wanted to achieve peace because it represents acceptance of Israel by the Arab world and a historic milestone in Zionism's century-long quest for legitimacy. So my hard question is, can there be peace as long as Netanyahu remains in power?
Well, I think that the current positions of the Netanyahu government are diametrically opposed to the idea of peace. Netanyahu wants this government, which is the sixth Netanyahu government, actually denies the reality that there is an indigenous Arab people in the land that is under the control of the state of Israel. It's black on white, it's not interpretation. And then they're also saying that they want to extend Israeli sovereignty to control these areas, obviously without pledging commitment to equal political and human rights. So there is absolutely no way that this is a government with this platform that could lead to peace with the Palestinians or with the Arab world. That being said, Netanyahu, in his record, in the past, have shown the capability of being pragmatic. And two most important cases is what is called the Bar Ilan speech in 2009, where he accepted, albeit with many conditions, the outcome of two nation states for two people. But much later, Netanyahu and his team co-authored with President Trump and his team the so-called Trump Plan for Peace and Prosperity. This is a plan that Netanyahu himself referred to as part of the deal of the century. And this is a plan, black on white. Your audience, your listeners that will take the time to read the Trump Plan for Peace and Prosperity, speaks about two nation states for two people, speaks about a Palestinian state that has control over nearly the equivalent of 86% of the what we call the West Bank, about an expansion of Gaza to the Negev as part of a territorial swap so that Gaza is bigger for the Gazan population. This is a document that Prime Minister Netanyahu endorsed in January 2020. Okay, so we are talking about less than 5 years ago. In the preamble for this document, it says that the precondition for implementing these agreements, these understandings, is that Hamas will be removed from Gaza. At the time, nobody believed it was possible. And Netanyahu's people said to their audience, they said, look, all these conditionalities that we put that will never happen, like removing Hamas from Gaza, this is your insurance policy. It basically means we signed yes, we agreed to a document which will never be implemented. But then guess what? History has interesting ways of unfolding.
Right.
And right now, Israel is moving close to eliminating the control of Hamas in Gaza, which means that the primary precondition for implementing the Trump plan for peace and prosperity is actually being realized. So what I want to say is, because Netanyahu, in his conduct, in his history, he has this pragmatic element in him, your audience should not rule out the possibility that he could turn on his right-wing allies, far-right allies, and eventually kind of pivot to the center, acknowledge the possible outcome of a Palestinian state at some point in the future, what we now call the political horizon. That will allow him to have a normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia. It will also open the door for the UAE to deploy forces and in Gaza, begin the Gaza reconstruction, etc. So yes, in the current government, it is impossible. But in a different government, you could foresee Netanyahu moving in the direction of a peaceful resolution.
In a few places, I want to ask you about a central factor in these negotiations and in the frameworks. And I thought of it because you've mentioned it in interviews, you brought it up several places in your book. I thought of it as the Jedi mind trick of these negotiations. I was hoping you could explain why you believe that Palestinian statehood was the most significant issue in the framework agreement to Israel's long-term identity and national security.
Right, because I believe that the mission of the State of Israel, as I said earlier, is to serve and continue the significant existence of the Jewish people. In order for Israel to actually represent the Jewish people, we have to stay a democracy. Israel cannot be the embodiment of the aspirations of the Jewish people throughout history if it is not a democracy. Now, in order to be a democracy that is of a Jewish character, there has to be a very significant Jewish majority within the borders of the State of Israel. Meaning, in order to preserve the ethos of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, meaning a state that is Jewish because it's democratic. A lot of our critics around the world are saying, how can you be Jewish and democratic? It's contradiction in terms. And I'm saying it's not a contradiction in terms when the vast majority of the population is Jewish. We need to choose which day of rest are we going to have? Friday per the Muslims, Saturday per the Jews, or Sunday per the Christians? When 80% of the population is Jewish, it's just natural that the national day of rest will be Saturday. Okay, so what I'm saying is there's no contradiction between being Jewish and being democratic if there is a Jewish majority, which is why we have to end the control over the Palestinian population. And ending the control of the Palestinian population will only come into being, will only be realized if there is a Palestinian state that that realizes the right of people to self-determination. So basically, a Palestinian state is essential for preserving the ethos of Israel. Now, people say this state will be a threat to Israel, an existential threat. And actually, in this point, I believe that the Palestinian state needs to come into being with an agreement with Israel, through an agreement with Israel that addresses Israel's security concerns. Now, some people say that this is a state with limited powers, a state with limited sovereignty. There are all these terms that are being used by President Trump, by President Bush, by President Clinton, by prime ministers in Israel, Prime Minister Barak, Prime Minister Olmert, even Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he spoke about a Palestinian state in the Trump plan. They're all referring to the same concept, which means, yes, a Palestinian state comes into being, but because it comes into being in a moment of an agreement with Israel, it already comes into being with some limited powers. And those powers and those limitations on the powers are designed to enhance the security of Israel. It is widely agreed, including by the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, that Palestinian state should be demilitarized, especially after the events of October 7. We know that there has to be adequate security arrangements. And what has happened because of October 7 is that leading Arab countries now understand our concern. When we used to say, hey, we need to control the perimeter of the Palestinian state security-wise, well, the team that I negotiated, Prime Minister Barak, said we need to control the perimeter of the Palestinian side. Everybody said, oh, it's just another way of continuing the occupation. But now people understand. People understand that there has to be that control. Now, that control cannot be belligerent through imposition. It has to be agreed upon by the Palestinians. So you may ask, why would the Palestinians agree to ever agree to that? And the answer is, and we see it over and over again, that if Israel is not secure, the Palestinians are not safe.
Right, right.
When Israel is not secure, the Palestinians are at risk. When the Palestinians cause so much damage and killing in Israel on October 7, nearly 1,150 dead people, thousands of wounded, 360 seriously wounded, 251 abducted to Gaza. The result was a calamity in Gaza, an absolute humanitarian disaster.
Right.
Okay, so what we know from history, and also we know from the current case, is when Israel is safe and secure, the Palestinian state can be safe and secure. And that's why there is a mutual interest here.
So one of the most difficult issues that you brought up, and that's been brought up in every peace negotiation. And forgive me, I forgot the right term, but I'm thinking of it as the finality of grievances.
Finality of
Um,
claims.
what
Finality of
what
claims.
final?
Finality of claims.
Right, right. And especially in this last year, from October 7th to what Palestinian citizens would say, the bombing of Gaza, and so many different events that have happened just this year. How how do you overcome that hurdle? How do you the finality of, what is it again? The finality
Finality of claims. So
claims.
basically, the originally we thought about it more as a legal concept. We didn't understand, honestly speaking, our team with all of our preparation and deliberation and the analysis and the best brains, we never understood how politically significant finality of claims is. So first of all, let me explain what is this demand of finality of claims. We said to the Palestinian side, look, you need to bring all of your claims from Israel to the negotiation table. We will negotiate them. We reach an agreement. Once we reach an agreement, you can only have one claim from Israel, which is to implement the agreement. What was our concern? Our concern was that we will have an agreement, we will ratify it in the Knesset, in our parliament, we will make the historical concessions. And then at some point in the future, the Palestinians will come forward and say, hey, there is this UN General Assembly Resolution 194. There is this Resolution 181. There is a Resolution, 242. And according to these international resolutions, there's still outstanding claims that we want to negotiate again, meaning what we call the permanent status agreement will
Yeah.
only be a stepping stone for additional demands. So from the beginning of the negotiations, we said to the Palestinians, you have to come forward with everything.
Mm.
And we will negotiate all of your claims into one agreement, after which there's one demand to implement the agreement. Now, this sounds simple. It's basically what every negotiation, it's kind of a basic expectation in every negotiation. Both parties bring their claims and they're being resolved in an agreement. But in this case, what we could not appreciate is how unprepared and effectively incapable the Palestinians were in discussing and prioritizing their own claims. Because
Mm.
when we told to them, bring forward all your claims, they needed to decide, what do we want from Israel? Until then, it was very easy. Every person that had a claim from Israel could come forward and throw their claims. Everything go. But now we said, look, we need a list. Bring it all together. Bring it all to the table. And what that required of them is, first of all, to decide what they want from us and then to prioritize these claims. Because obviously they couldn't get everything they wanted. And because they had a very weak political system, they had no bureaucratic capability. They had barely no civil service to support them, etc. They actually were incapable of going through the internal process of prioritizing, of deciding what really matters for them. So the more we pushed for a finality of claims, the pressure grew and grew internally. And I believe that this is, to a large degree, the reason for the implosion of the negotiations beginning on September 28th. So effectively, the serious negotiations begin in May until September for about 4 months. The highlight of that period is the Camp David summit from July 11 to July 25 at the Camp David retreat of the US president, then President Clinton. But then 2 months later, the negotiations implode. And I believe that the major reason for the implosion is the fact that there was so much pressure on their side coming from us. Finality of claims. Bring all your claims forward. You have to prioritize. We have to make a deal.
Yeah. Penalty of claims. I can't imagine whether it's families of Palestinians who've lost their homes and lost their loved ones, Palestinian citizens, as well as people that my family knows, who lost their loved ones on October 7th. To have your government say, we need to put this to bed in order to arrive at peace. That's an impossible needle to thread, it seems like.
Well, that was a different period because um, relative to what we're seeing right now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was quite benign. We had some clashes, of course, but in historical terms, in comparative terms, we didn't have a lot of dead and a lot of wounded. Also, remember that in the 1990s, you could still move between Israel and Palestine. A lot of Israelis met Palestinians. A lot of Palestinians met Israelis. So it wasn't that distant. And there were a lot of other reasons why we thought that we could negotiate with the Palestinians a peace treaty. On the Palestinian side, there was a very strong, politically strong, what you may call today peace camp. There were people who believed in a historical compromise with Israel. And my book with my co-author, Professor Aryeh Filalo, we tell their story and we share how much they were willing to risk to have peace with Israel. In many ways, if we kind of zoom out, they are the tragic figures of this story more than anybody else. Because if you are a member of the Palestinian peace camp in 2000, you were offered a state that covers 95 to 99% of the West Bank and all of Gaza. You were offered $40 billion to begin to resolve the refugee issue. You had an offer that included a Palestinian capital in the area of Jerusalem, some sort of control and administrative management of Temple Mount. You had so many things that were put on the table, and all that was needed was for Arafat and the leadership to agree to, which they didn't. 25 years later, look at the disaster and the calamity. So if you are a Palestinian who believed in peace in 2000, your heart must be bleeding. Now, right now, of course, we are in a totally different situation. October 7 was a savagery at a level that nobody had imagined ever in the political process. It was, I would say, 25, 50 times bigger than the biggest suicide bomb that we ever had in our history. Something like that, dozens of times bigger than any single event that we have seen. And of course, after that, when the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, went into Gaza to uproot Hamas, and Hamas is a threat for peace. Whenever we get close to peace, Hamas intervened with terror and ideology to undermine the peace process. It happened in the 90s, it happened in early 2000, it happened after the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. Over and over again, Hamas, as a radical Islamic organization, mobilized to derail the peace process. So if any of your listeners are pro-peace, they should be against Hamas. And Hamas is fighting from within the Palestinian population, underneath the Palestinian population, placing the civilian population between its militants and terrorists and the IDF. It's a tragedy. Every civilian person lost there, a life lost there is a tragedy. And there's no but. So if we believe in peace, Hamas has to be removed. And paradoxically, I hope that we may be much closer to this moment, and that we may be very close to this moment. And that moment, when Hamas is removed, can actually open opportunities for peace that are very hard to imagine right now. I hope, and some recent polls indicate that the Palestinian population in Gaza no longer supports Hamas in its majority. There was a recent poll that I read that only 30% support Hamas. So meaning, just imagine, everybody imagine that after the disaster in Gaza, people are tired. They want peace.
Yeah.
They want to live in peace. They want to go back to a home. Now, will be 66% of the homes and the buildings in Gaza are destroyed. 66%. 2/3 of the population is displaced, which means people want a new home. They want a new neighborhood. They want to come down to see a nice road, a playground, a school. And then, and all of that is possible within a few years. If we pass this kind of threshold of recognizing that there will be a Palestinian state, the UAE coming in, deploying an international force with other groups, billions of dollars for the reconstruction of Gaza. This war, as bad as it looks, could be a turning point.
So I want to ask you where we go from here. You've already indicated that you do see a path forward, but I do need to ask you about U.S. domestic politics. What's been your reaction to you're based in New York still, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So what has been your reaction to the protests? We've seen it on many college campuses around the US and the world, as well as the rise of anti-Semitism that we've seen, especially in this last year.
So I think that we have to um, try to understand the phenomena we're looking at. Some of the protests are critical of Israeli policies. I'm critical of Israeli policies. It's legitimate to be critical of policies of the Israeli government. Then at some point the line is being crossed, and what we're looking at is the delegitimization of Israel and anti-Semitism. And the delegitimization of Israel happens when Israel is being singled out, demonized, and delegitimized, when the very right of Israel to exist is being questioned. At that point, we're dealing with anti-Semitism.
Mm.
And that's a totally different phenomenon. But then when you move further on that spectrum, we have to understand, and I've been saying this publicly, and I think increasingly it's being revealed, that there has been extensive external intervention in this American dynamic. So the protests against the policies of the Israeli government are acceptable, ethically acceptable. Anti-Semitism, ethically unacceptable, but it's been a part of America for a long time, unfortunately. But then there is this other element where foreign forces, Russian, Chinese, Iranian,
Right.
Qatari, intervene in American society. And that is a national security threat. This is dangerous because especially the Russians, but also the Chinese and the Iranians, they have been very good at stirring things up. I believe, I don't have a proof, but I do believe that there is a line that connects the dots between the protests against Israel on campus and the yellow vest protest in France that basically rattled French politics, and the protests that happened in Italy, and the rise of the far right in Austria just this week, a very significant political victory. There is a common thread there, and that common thread is it serves Moscow, and this is where there is a spectrum of events that may seem on the face of things as the same thing. Some of it is legitimate, some of it is ethically illegitimate, and some of it is a national security problem. And I really hope that the people in Washington are watching this, because for these interventions, this is a national security threat. This is like the intervention in American elections. This is an intervention in the mode of operation of American society, and that's very, very serious.
Right, right. That sounds like it's ripe for a whole other episode unto itself.
Yes, I'm
A
not an
whole,
expert on it, by the way, but I
yeah,
just see the systematic element of it. We're seeing Russians, for example, intervening in Israel.
yeah,
Russians are inciting different groups that are radical groups in Israel to basically clash with each other. They're promoting Arab Israelis to rise up against the government. There are systematic Russian interventions in Israeli politics, and we're seeing it here. We're seeing it across the Western world. This is something really big. It's huge,
yeah.
and unfortunately for the Jewish community, we find ourselves dealing with these protests, where on some side of one area of this friction with the protest is a political debate, then it's an ethical debate, it's illegitimately anti-Semitic, and then there is this other thing where we are just a pawn in a global war for power
Yeah.
between the United States and these other superpowers.
So I've heard hints that given what's happened over this last year, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of October 7th. Um, do I sense a bit of hope? And if so, where do you see things going from here?
So it's very hard to be hopeful at the moment, but I do want to point out a few things. First of all, I'm speaking to those in your audience that believe in peace. I'm a person whose entire adult life has served the cause of peace and supported very significant compromises by Israel in order to reach peace. So from this perspective, I want to say the following. What we're seeing in Lebanon is potentially historic. Hezbollah is a bad, bad actor.
Mm-hmm.
They're terrorists. They've killed Americans. They've killed Israelis. They've killed people over the world. Most of all, they've killed Sunni Syrians. And they are a representative of another evil government, which is in Iran. The fact that they're being beat up in Lebanon is not just Israeli success. It's a success for the entire Western world. And it creates an opportunity for Lebanon to finally, hopefully, come together as a country, relieved of this of the hold of Hezbollah, and creating a political system that can move forward. In the best of worlds, if I can, if I would have a magic wand to design the future, this war in Lebanon, and as you're recording this episode, the Israeli forces are moving into southern Lebanon after striking at the leadership of Hezbollah for the last 2 weeks. This war should end with a bilateral Israeli-Lebanese agreement that recognizes the mutual border, turns the border into a border that is bilaterally agreed and internationally recognized. No more territorial disputes between Israel and Lebanon. No more territorial claims between the two countries. Second is the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which means that only the Lebanese army can be close to the border. Hezbollah or any other militia cannot come down closer to the border than the Litani River. Those of your people in your audience can look at the map where it is. This is vital for the future of Lebanon. That happens, then we are actually moving into the ability to, perhaps kind of stabilize Syria. I do acknowledge that this may require an agreement with Iran. Why can we get an agreement with Iran now on better terms than anything before? Because for the first time in 25 years, they are on their back foot. It's the first major setback to the Iranian, what they call the Ring of Fire, the proxy system that they have built in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and so on. First major setback in 25 years. So in Lebanon, what has happened in the last 2 days creates opportunities. Nobody knows how we're going to unfold. It's a complex and dynamic system, but at least you can see the opportunity in Gaza. With regard to Gaza, sadly today, the positions of the Israeli government will not allow any positive progress. But the Israeli government is increasingly facing the challenges of governing Gaza and the tremendous diplomatic, economic, administrative consequences of that. And they are begging the Emiratis, they're begging international forces to come in. And everyone says, no, we're not coming in unless you guys recognize the political horizon that includes a Palestinian state. And we're not coming in unless you recognize that the Palestinian Authority and the PLO are the governing body of Gaza. We have to be invited by the Palestinians, because otherwise we, meaning the Emiratis, we may be seen by the Gazans as occupiers. We're not willing to do that. So they're pushing and pushing in this direction. And eventually, I think the Israeli government will have to agree, because the alternative, which is direct control of Israel in Gaza, is far worse.